everybody, it's me, Harrowcraft Creations, and welcome to the first video in my tutorial series on how to sew the Curlworks free-to-use poofy handpaw pattern. You will be able to find the link for this pattern in the description box down below, but let me show you what you are going to be needing today for your materials. Now, for tutorial purposes, I do have fleece fabric to demonstrate how I will be assembling everything, but what you will need is your fur fabric, the pattern, a needle and thread or your sewing machine, and a pair of scissors. So what we're going to do right now is just set all of our items that we are going to be using aside, such as the scissors, the needle and thread, your fur fabric. We're going to put that aside really quick. What I want everybody to do while you're following along is make sure that you label your patterns. If you're transferring it, which I highly recommend you transfer it onto those plastic for sale signs. I use them a lot in all of my pattern making, especially with patterns that I have personally purchased off of Etsy. And if you're going to be using this pattern a lot, I highly recommend buying something that you can transfer the template to. So what we're going to do is, if it's not already, which I'm assuming that it is because it's been a while since I've downloaded the pattern, we're going to just label our patterns. This shape right here is considered the top of the paw. This part right here is considered the bottom of the paw, where the paw pads will be, which is like this area right here. You have your small fingers, your big finger for the top view of the hands, and then these are your big and your small for the bottom of the hands. You're also going to notice that I have transferred the sewing markings here that are on your pattern. If you look at your pattern, they will have indicators that are on the paper. That's where you'll be sewing to the top here. Just make sure you go ahead and label your pieces, big and small, because that's how I will be referencing the patterns from here forward. After you've gotten everything labeled, what you're going to do next is you are going to draw some arrows on your patterns like this to indicate the direction of the fur. Now, what a lot of beginners have the mistake, which I myself was a beginner once, I made a mistake. You always want to make sure that the fur is going towards the tip of your fingers. Fur does not run the opposite way. It does not run this way. It runs down towards the fingers. That's the reason why I have even though my patterns are facing upwards, when you pattern it, you want the fur to, basically be facing down. I'll show you in a second. So you're going to have your fur fabric. Normally what I do is I take one little spot and I mark the direction of the fur on the back side. You see how the fur is flowing down? When you're patterning your pieces, if you pattern the fur going up, you're going to have fur that looks like this going the wrong way. That's what you don't want. What you actually want is the fur to be facing towards you when you're patterning, hence the reason why you made the marks. You're going to want that to be facing you. I don't know if you can notice it right here. The fur fibers are going down. Again, it also helps if you mark the direction of the fur before you start patterning. A lot of makers make that mistake. Well, they won't have the indicator here and they'll have the fur upside down, pattern out their whole pattern, and boom, you made a mistake. You just wasted material. And if you're getting into the fursuiting business, that's one thing that you don't want to do, is waste material, because material is money. Our time is money, and we don't have time to be wasting materials. So make sure your fur is going in the right direction. Make sure you label all of your patterns with all the arrows facing up when you look at it. So like that, when you pattern it, you already know that your arrows are matching the direction of the flow of the fibers, the fur fibers. So again, for tutorial purposes, we will not be using fur fabric. You will be following along on your fabric. So just for tutorial sake, I am going to draw arrow marks facing down so you can follow along with me as I draw out the patterns onto the fabric. All right, so after we have all of this set aside, I think I'm gonna do this as a one big tutorial just to get it done and over with in one go. So after we have all of our pieces, and that also includes the bottom of the paw pieces, you want, even though it's gonna be facing up, you still want your fur fibers going up. So let us go ahead and start with the big piece here. Take your big piece. We're gonna designate this. All right, so we have our pattern. We're getting ready to pattern out now. Remember, always look at your arrow. If it helps, make it a little bit thicker so you know which way you're going. Always follow the directions of your fur fabric on the back side. Some people would be like, but high row. No, but high row. No, just make sure you're on this side of the fabric, not this side, please. This is the side that you're gonna be patterning on. So we have our pattern here. We're just going to go ahead and trace along. Now don't worry about getting marks on your paper or your plastic, because if you're going to be reusing it, you can see here I've used this pattern a lot. Now, once you're done, you're going to have this shape. A good rule of thumb is to always mark the direction of the fur and put top. So you know that it correlates with the top of the paw. Now, what I want you to pattern next is the bottom of the paw pad, or the bottom of the paw. Make sure that you give yourself some room in between patterns, because that's going to be your seam allowance when you are sewing. We're going to go ahead and it gives us enough room here, enough space there. I've used this pattern a lot to where I don't need the little markings that are on the big piece. It'll have some lines here, 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 and there. You're more than welcome to draw those for your practicing purposes, but I will not, because I already know where those lines are at. And then once you've had that outline, always make sure, if you're going to hand sew, trace this out, and you'll thank me later. Mark there, and then we'll do bottom. All right, so now we have our two pieces. You're gonna want to do this 2 times, one for one paw, one for another. So when you're patterning on your fur fabric, say this part is your extra part of your fabric if you're doing this on the floor and following along. Make sure you give yourself about 1 finger distance in between, just so like that you have like a visual. If you don't want to use like rulers or anything, I don't like using rulers. I usually just gauge it because my cuts are pretty decent. But for you out there who are first starting, give yourself about a finger's distance, so like that when you're cutting for your seam allowance, you'll have enough space. We'll get into reverse patterning in a moment. With the Curlworks pattern, it's going to have you do 4 fingers for 1 paw. So that's 2 big pieces and 2 small pieces for 1 paw. Hence the reason why we label them big and small. So we're going to write big with a number 1 on it. Now, the way that you pattern your first piece, what you're going to want to do is move it down and then flip it, because you have a left hand and a right hand. So make sure you flip it. Make sure you, for those of you just beginning, make sure you transfer, I have them in silver here, but make sure you transfer the lines again to the back side of your pattern, because you'll find in a lot of fursuit making that people use one pattern and just reverse it for the other side. It makes life a heck of a lot easier. And then you see how these curves are different. We're going to be talking about that a little bit later in the video. So after you've done your 2 pieces, you're going to have 4 pieces. You know, you have 2 of these going this way. You see how it points that way? The opening points that way. You're going to have 2 of these and then 2 of those. You're going to have 4 pieces all together. That's why you put big 1, big 2, big 3, big 4. Whenever you are finished patterning your pieces, be sure to gather what you've patterned. Like the big pieces were done already. We have 2 of these already. We have 2 of these already. And set them off to the side so that you don't get confused with what you have left to pattern. So we're going to go ahead and grab your small pieces. Same thing. Make sure that you do 4 of your small pieces. And again, if it helps, do your second one either to the same side or underneath it. But again, for tutorial purposes, I'm just going to do the reverse underneath it. But make sure that you have 4 pieces. Again, what I'm doing is I'm taking this, moving the fabric over. We've already done 2 of these. So you're going to flip it to have your reverse for your other hand. So we're going to go bloop, bloop. This is done. Put that over there. Grab another piece of my fabric just to keep colors separated. And what you're going to want to do is the same thing. Make sure for your under paw pieces, make sure you're following your arrows if you're grabbing a different color. We're going to do the 2 of these and 2 of these. Again, we're going to do, just so you can see, it's all repetition. For the paw pads, you're going to want to do your inner circle, B for big. Now this is where you do your reversing. You see how I went from how this curves this way? Flip it. Again, imagine that I'm using fur fabric. It's best to start with just one fur color for sanity's sake. Put it off to the side so you don't lose your pattern. Again, the reason why I'm giving so much space is for tutorial purposes. This is a small... Oh, and don't forget to number 1, 2. All I did was move it over. Give yourself some space. Small 2. Now you're going to want to make sure that you have 2 big ones, 2 small ones for 1 paw. So we're going to set that aside. Now let's get to cutting out our patterns. Make sure that when you guys are cutting out your fur fabric, I'm going to show you on my scrap piece of fur. What you do not want to do is you do not want to do this. You don't want to do that, because this is what it's going to look like if you just cut straight across. You don't want that. That's not good. Why? Because then you've just ruined the bottom of your fur fabric. You see that? How it doesn't have a nice fluffy tip there? You just ruined your fur fabric. It's not going to give you the finished quality, the nice quality that you want. So instead, what I want you to do is I want you to do tiny little snips with just the tip of your scissors, like so. You're going to take it. Now everybody cuts their fur fabric differently, but you'll see why I do this. You go little snips, pull out, go back in. If you feel like you're not cutting anything, out, back in, out, back in, and then, well, since I had cut what I cut, we'll go a little higher. You'll feel it. That's the difference. You see? Compared to, let's bring this back. Oh no. Comparing the bottom of this to how that looks, you see the difference. You see that the fur fibers are still intact. It gives you a nice clean edge when you're sewing. Unlike with this, where you damage the fur fibers underneath, and it's just, it makes for a very bad time. You don't want this. What you're looking for when you take your time cutting, oh, there we go. You don't want that. You really don't want that when you're cutting. So, again, tiny little snips. Even with the most smallest of details, you can still go with tiny snips, and you'll still get, you see how that's separated with the fur fibers still on the end, nice and long? That's what you want when you're cutting out these patterns. So we're gonna take the first small finger, the bottom of your finger pattern, and when you're cutting it, make sure you give, like, cut them into like little sections. I should have said that first. Cut your patterns separate them, put them in piles of their pieces. I'm going to do that with this. Again, even though you see me cutting like this, take your time cutting the fur fabric. Pause the video if you need to catch up with the cutting of your fur fabric, but take your time. Finger pieces with the finger pieces. Sometimes with this piece, I already give it like a small seam allowance, but you can always go back and clean it up later. Okay, so at this point, you have your patterns. Before we fully cut them out, what I like to do is I like to pre-shave my fur pieces. Again, for the quality that I produce, this is what I do. You do it however you feel like you want to do it. But the way that I make my hand paws, I like to pre-shave the patterns before cutting them out fully, because it gives you a nice, smoother surface to work with when you're trying to sew your paw pads, or just, it cuts down working time when you shave the fur. I like to pre-shave my fur pieces. What I use currently is a wireless dog clippers. I found them on eBay. I'll leave the link down in the description down below. If you want to buy yours on Amazon for Amazon Prime, more power to you, but it'll be cheaper to use the ones from eBay as a good beginner set of dog clippers. So after you've shaved them, well, another key thing before we get to cutting out these patterns, I like to shave my fur. Some people, you see how the blades are all the way close to the top? The way I shave the fur, when I don't have no additional attachments, and I make sure that the acrylic piece is all the way as far down as it can go. Like 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 4 clicks down. That's as far as it goes, is 4 clicks. So make sure you have some scrap fur to practice on it. I'll cover shaving fur in another video, but for right now, we are working on the pattern. So what you're going to do when you're getting ready to cut out your fur fabric with the pattern traced on the back, you're going to leave about this much. Hold on. You're going to want at least that much for your seam allowance. You see how on the top here there's just like barely enough. Yeah, so that's what you want. And you're going to want that all around. It's kind of like a good distance away from your scissors, like about that much. You don't want it to be super close. You just want just enough. If you're hand sewing, it'll be enough seam allowance. It doesn't have to be a crazy big amount, but it's enough. Once you start doing it a few times or cutting out your patterns a few times, you'll know how much to cut around without having to like draw a line So that's how I do it. That's how much seam allowance I have for when I'm hand sewing. Quick to mention, if you accidentally get a little bit too happy and you cut off a little bit too close to your seam allowance, as long as it's towards your corner, you're fine. This is why we practice, and we learn during practice. Here. Alright, so now we have all of our pieces. And you're looking at everything like, OMG, what is Hyro doing? What does Hyro have me doing? Do not be afraid. Remember how I told you, separate all your pieces from your small fingers. All 4 pieces go in one pile. All 4 big pieces in one pile. You should have 2 of these, the same shape. 2 of these. 2 of these, and you should have 4 finger pieces, 2 facing this way and 2 going that way, like this. They're opposite of each other. The curves go towards each other. So 4 finger pieces or paw pad pieces or whatever, and then 4 of these small ones. Separate it. Keep your area clean. Okay, so let's start with something easy. Right off the back, what you're going to want to do is refer to my other video on my channel on how to sew paw pads. I am not going to be discussing that in this video. I have another video showing how to do the paw pads, so please go to that video and then come back to this time mark wherever you pause it to continue, because you're going to want to do the paw pads first before you do anything else. Before you start assembling anything, do your paw pads first. Go ahead, pause the video, come back. I'll be here. I'm not going anywhere. And once you've sewn your paw pads, this is how it's going to be assembled. Put your arrows facing up. Everything from this point forward, the arrows are going to be facing away from you. So you have your big fingers and your small fingers, right? So it's funny that I put them like this. This is not how they're going to go. You're going to put one big finger there, another big finger there, the small finger there, and the small finger there. Pause the video before continuing to make sure that you have your pieces lined up. Just like this. It should go small, big, big, small. In this order. Once you're done aligning them, what I like to do is, I should have mentioned it earlier, I actually have fabric clips. These are optional. You do not need them really for this project, but for me, I like to use it when I'm hand sewing. So you're going to separate these pieces. These clips are optional. You can get them off of eBay. You can get them off of Amazon. They're small little fabric clips. You don't need them. These are optional to use. But to make your life easier, invest in a small box of 100. Trust me, you'll thank me later. Now, take one of these, and on your pattern, you're going to have lines right here. and there should be like one right there and one right there. These lines will indicate where your pieces are going to align. So starting with, let's say, this one. Everything right now is facing, this is the furry, fluffy side of the paw, of the fur fabric. This is the back side that you traced your pattern on. You're going to take your pattern. I usually like to have the little pieces facing me. And you are going to do, well, first, clip it. Always clip it down here, because you're going to start in this corner. We are going to do a blanket stitch, and I'm going to show you what that looks like with the blanket stitch. The kind of thread that I'm using here is upholstery thread. You can also use all-purpose thread, but it's not going to be as strong of a hold than the upholstery. This is the all-purpose sewing thread, but it makes it harder for when you're trying to pull your knots closed. Your thread may break when you're hand sewing, so please use upholstery thread. Upholstery thread. We're going to do a blanket stitch. So how I do that is I start here in the corner. I go here in the corner, go through. You're going to pull your thread until you see it stop right there. Then you're going to go in next, a little bit away from it, not too far. Poke your needle halfway through. Pull your thread towards you with the hole open. You see that? And you're going to put the loop over and stick the needle through that hole. That's how you're going to be starting your blanket stitch. So again, it doesn't have to, this is your first time. Don't worry about it being perfect. You're going to go a little space away. Let me bring that close. A little space away. You're going to open the thread. Open the thread towards you. Open the thread away from you. Let it go. And pull it up. All right. So now you finished your first finger. Congratulations. Now you have this thread here. The way that I like to close off my sewing thread here, I take it, I'm holding the needle in my right hand because I'm right-handed. I go behind the thread and up. You just make a knot. Hold it, and then I double knot it. I like to do double knots on all of my work. And you're done. You have that there. And we cut it. I'm going to try to turn off this auto focus. And there we go. You just sewed your first finger. This is what it should look like. You know, with the paw pad already sewn on. You'll have your other paw pads here. But this is what it'll look like once you are done with your first finger. Now I'm going to set up my sewing machine. For those of you who already know how to use a sewing machine, this part is for you. Skip ahead if you are hand sewing, and we'll be back with the finished product for everybody. Alright, so now that we're back with the sewing machine, we're gonna just continue with the next piece on the pattern. So if you know how to do your sewing on the sewing machine, I cannot English and things, just again, have the finger, your piece facing toward you. Again, this is the fluffy side of the fabric. Line up your ends. You're gonna, hold on. You're going to want to line up your ends here. You see there where your lines are at from here to here. Make sure you line it up, and you're going to want to tuck in all of that fur behind. And now this is where the clip comes in handy. I don't know what I did with one, so we're just going to do this really quick. Okay, so you're going to want to take at least one clip and put it here and in the middle of your two pieces. Now, everybody sews differently. The way that I like to sew my pieces, what we are going to do, how we are going to sew this is, you have your piece. You see where your line is? That's where you're gonna line up your needle. Make sure that your needle is the one that's right on top of it, if that makes any sense. You're gonna look from the top. Let me get that autofocus back. Bloop. Okay, so from here, oops, sorry. You're gonna make sure that the needle is in line with your seam allowance on the finger part. Don't worry about the back. We're worrying about your finger piece. And make sure that the edges align right here to where your under fabric is not sticking out. Oh, and before I get started, I'm using a regular straight stitch on a 3 length, 3 width, and a 2 for your so we're gonna go 3 forward, back, and then forward. And also take your time. There's no rush with the machine sewing. Take your time, because it's gonna have a whole different kind of feeling between the fluffy side and the flat side. You're gonna feel like you're doing something wrong, but just take your time and make sure that you are, well, once you get here, you're gonna wanna hold your fabric like this, kind of. You're gonna hold the back, push down, make sure your two fabrics are still aligned, push down with your fingers, take your time, adjust your fingers, and once you get to just the very edge, I have to show you before I go ahead and continue, you'll see that you're at like the very, very, very edge there. That's where you're going to want to start your reverse stitch, and then go slowly back forward to lock your stitches in place. So bam, reverse, and it's done. It should look like this. It should look like that. Now go ahead and pause this video if you need to, and I am going to fast forward me sewing the rest of these finger pieces for you guys. Okay, so we're back and we have our small, big, big, small. This is where we're at with this. Now that we're done, when you flip it over, it's gonna look like that. What you wanna do, if you have a brush already, go ahead and brush out the fur that you've sewn. So like that, it falls over the fingers. This is a totally different pattern, but it has the same effect. Once you finish with the bottom, there we go. Once you finish with the bottom here, this is a different pattern, but I'm using this as an example. You're gonna want to brush out your seams. With anything that you do, you're gonna always want to brush out your seams, because then it'll give it a nice smoother transition between between the two pieces. You got your paw piece and then you have your finger piece. Again, this is not this pattern, this is a different pattern. But I'm just showing what I mean by brushing out. Just brush out the bottom pieces. You'll thank me later. So after you're done, you got your stuff, you're brushing it out. Now what? You toss it to the side. Like literally, bloop, toss it to the side. Because we are going to work on these pieces. Yes, those confusing pieces that haunt everybody. So what I want you to do first is get your 4 pieces, and I want you to follow the curvature. You should have 2 opposite pieces. Two opposite pieces. I don't know if you could see that. If you could see that. What I want you to do, if you have it, if you have clips, or if you're gonna just start with one, pick up one of the, we'll start with the one on the left if you've separated it like you've done with me. Pick up the piece. If you're gonna start sewing, we're gonna get to it later, but for those of us that like to get things done and be organized, you're gonna clip the tip to the tip, the tip to the tip. This is your fluffy side of the fur. This is where you drew your pattern. Again, I'm going to go slowly. You're going to take it and take the tips. Again, I'm going to do it again. You're going to go like that. Go down. Don't go up. It doesn't go this way. It bends away from you to where you can still see your pattern. If you can't see your pattern, you're doing it wrong. So you're going to clip it. If you have the little needles, you can still do the same thing. Take it. It's just so you can see what you're doing. Just to hold on to it. If you have needles, same thing. I prefer clips because they are not pokey, stabby. So we're going to make sure that we clip all of these. Again, this is optional. Tip to tip. Now what we're going to do is we are going to hand sew the top finger parts. Right here, right there, from here to the point. I'm going to show you that on both fingers. We're going to hand sew it. Machine sewers, I'm sorry, but I don't machine sew these darts on the fingers, and I will tell you why. Because in the event that you mess up with the sewing machine, it is going to be very hard to separate your seams. That's why I hand sew delicate darts like this. So what you're going to do is start at the tip. Again, we're going to be using a blanket stitch. Okay, so now that you have sewn all of your darts closed, it should look like this. With poofy, they should look poofed up. They should look poofed up. However, when you're looking directly at the pattern pieces, you're going to notice that the fingers actually curve inwards. I don't know if you can see it here. It's curving in. That is how you know which piece will go where. If you do, when you're done sewing them, they'll look more poofy, but you can immediately see how it's got a natural curve inwards. Let's go ahead and grab our top piece, this top piece. What I usually like to do at this point is label, and the reason why I'm doing this last is because you can easily get confused if you're sewing and you're not paying attention. On your pattern that you have, the printed pattern has these markings, just like the bottom of the hand. Oh, what we're gonna do is, it's the same thing, small, big, big, small. We're gonna put a B here, a B here, small, and small. The reason why I did not put small here is because the small part is this whole area here, and you'll see what I mean. This is where it's gonna get a little confusing, but you have your lines on the patterns, which is going to be your biggest identifier. So doing everything as is, you've already got your big pieces and your small pieces to the side. This is the reason why I did them in different colors. What we're going to do first, how I usually sew this pattern, is I start with the big pieces. We'll go with the one on your right hand side. Take the right curved piece, get these out of your way, or move them up. Take the right big piece and align this middle section with the lines that's on your pattern. You're going to go ahead and sew from this point to this point. Same thing. Listen to what I am saying. That's going to be attached. Then you're going to do the same thing. This is going to get in the way, but ignore it for right now. Just ignore it. I know it's driving you mad. I know you want to do something with it, but don't touch it. Leave it alone. Listen to what I'm saying. Again, the left hand piece, you're going to sew from here to here in your midsection of the lines. Again, let me make this a little bit bigger so you can see what I'm talking about. These are bigger lines. This is your midsection. You're going to sew it and sew it, and you're going to have these flappy things. If you don't have these flappy things when you are done, you did something wrong. You did something wrong and you didn't listen to me. Why didn't you listen to me? We're going to go over it again. One more time. You have your patterns. I'm going to go slow. Grab the right big finger piece. Bring it to your top piece. Look for the midsection. It's 1, 2, 3. left, right, middle. Take your middle section and line it up with the middle section here. Leave the flappy thing. The flappy thing is gonna be there. Once you're done sewing, take your other big finger piece and the midsection, left, right, middle, and sew from this point to this point for this piece. I will come back when I have that finished and I will show you what it looks like. Okay, and we're back. So now you have two finger pieces that look like this. You're like, Hyro, what in the godforsaken island have you done? Well, I have taken our two mid pieces from our finger pieces, our big finger pieces, and I sewn the mid sections. Now again, you should have two of these flappy things. Normally what I would do is I would get everything sewn together first, but you're probably like, this flappy middle part is driving me insane. What do I do? So I'm going to tell you what you're going to do. You're going to take the two middle flappy things and you are going to sew it. You're going to sew from the midpoint here all the way to that midpoint there. Okay, if you're following along while I'm sewing, which is like, I guess, a sew with me here, you should have what looks like extra flappy things down here. You should have the middle sections sewn to here and to here. Sorry about the sun. The sun's going down right now where I'm at. It is 2:03. Midsection to midsection. And then those two flappy pieces at the top, we just sewed them together. Please feel free to rewind the video to watch this process as many times as you need to understand what happens with those flappy pieces right here. Yes, it is okay to be paranoid. It is okay to be a little confused and scared, thinking that you did something wrong, but you didn't. If you're following along with me, you're right on track, and you trust me, I got you. Don't worry. You're doing just fine. Now, we are going to tackle the smaller pieces. Your smalls here. Pay attention to which way they curve. Again, this one is curving this way. This one is curving that way when you look at it. This one here, you see this flat piece of the pattern on both sides? Those flat pieces are going to align right here. So they're going to align the edge, the flat edge is going to align with the flat edge of this piece here. That line, oh, I forgot to draw the line. Ha! Force of habit. So you're going to have a line there, and you're also going to have a line there. My apologies. So where this line is here, you're going to line that up with that line. You see this line? Oh, you can't really see it. Sorry. That line with that line. But you want to make sure it's the flat part, not the diagonal part. The flat part. This is the diagonal part. You want the flat part on this side. If you're setting everything up how I have it on my desk, you won't fail. Trust me, you won't fail. So we're going to take this piece and we're going to, this is why I hand sew everything. We're going to take it and we are going to pin it, because this piece is just a little tricky in terms of sewing it together. You're going to notice that really fast. Don't worry. I've sewn a bunch of these paws. I know exactly how you're feeling. So again, if you have only what you have available, use these, but please be careful. Again, it's force of habit for me. I like to pin stuff, and you can technically flatten out your fur, even though it looks like it's, oh my god, it's not gonna fit. It is gonna fit. What you're gonna want to do is, as you're sewing, you can flatten the fabric along the other fabric, and it'll align itself. Again, I apologize if you hear talking in the background. My room isn't soundproof. I am sorry. But let's go ahead and let's sew this piece, and then I'll be right back. Okay, so now we're done sewing this section here to this section here. You notice how I did not tie off this thread here? That is because we are going to continue sewing from this point to this point where my two nails are bouncing back and forth. We're going to be sewing within there. So this marking that you had made earlier, you're going to line that up. Right there. It's going to look like that. That line to that line. Again, this is why either you can pin it or clip it. I like to do that so I know where to stop sewing. You can see right there and right there. Now this is going to be a little weird when you're looking at it as I am. You're going to push that fabric underneath and it's going to loosen your thread. That is okay. What I do here is I pull the thread and then I don't do a blanket stitch. I just push it through and pull it. I'm not doing a blanket stitch. I'm just pulling it straight through, and then I start with the next stitch over right here, the next one over. I go and then I do the blanket stitch. I'll be right back as soon as I'm done sewing this part. Now that we are done, what I like doing, since we have, again, we're back at the two flappy pieces. You see how we have the two flappy pieces right next to each other? Go ahead and sew them like we did this one. You're going to want to take the two flaps, pin them together. We're going to go ahead and, like I did right here, we're going to take it, we're going to just push the needle through. Don't do a blanket stitch, just push it through to the other fabric. Pull it, and then start your blanket stitch with the very next stitch over. Okay, now that we're back from Zoom land, what you should have right now in front of you, if you're following along, this is what you should be looking at. 3 fingers sewn together, one flappy finger part here, the other flappy finger part there, your midsection sewn here, this midsection sewn there, the flat side, this flat side sewn here. This line should match that line should match that line right here, this one. We're going to go ahead and repeat the same process that you did for this finger. We're going to repeat it with the second finger. Okay, now that we are back again from Zoom, I can't English. Right. Okay, so now this is what you should have. It should look like this. Your small pieces, whatever color it is, whatever your fur fabric that you're using, it should look like this. It looks crazy, I know, but trust me, trust the process. You'll have paws by the end of today. To pretend that you already have sewn your paw pad material where I'm filling them in on the felt. We're going to pretend that that's already sewn on. Etc. You get the idea. So, what you have now is the back side and the back side. What you are going to do first is you're going to line this up, the blue pieces, your base of your hand paws, that's gonna get sewn together. Where this finger starts is where that's how far you're going to be sewing. From here to there. Again, as for good force of habit, make sure that you clip wherever you are going to be sewing, so you know where to stop. Okay, now that we have this part sewn to this part, this is where it gets a little crazy. These are your back sides. You can either do the same thing here if you want, or no, you know what? Yeah. Scratch that. We're going to do that. We're going to do good habits here. So again, line it up. It may seem a little funky, but that's okay. Don't worry. You may think it's not lining up. Trust me, it is. Okay, now that you've sewn your two pieces together, it's gonna look like this. This is how the pattern looks like. You're not doing nothing wrong. If you've been following my directions, this is what you should have. Because then your hand is going to go in here. Top paw, bottom paw. Top paw, bottom paw. Now, you're wondering, oh my gosh, what is this? This flower looking hand thing. What do I do now? It's very simple. What you are going to do is you are going to look at the bottom. You're going to use the bottom as your guide. Now you may be thinking to yourself, oh, that's not going to fit, blah, blah, blah. But that's fine. What you're going to look for is, you see how this finger ends here, like this midpoint? Move finger. You see how there's this midpoint right here? This midpoint, you're going to take where the flappy things were that you sewed. We're going to take that, and we are going to push those to this inner little corner with the flappy things that you connected here. And again, this is why I like pins, because they don't stab. And then you see how it just falls into place right there? That's what you're going to do. You're going to sew all around here. You're going to sew all around. Again, you're going to take the two flappy things, your line that's right there, and you are going to either pin it or clip it. And you're going to sew all around right there. Do not freak out if you think it's not going to sew, like sew shut. It will sew shut. You may have to move the fabric around a little bit or push it in a little bit and then try to align it. But if it doesn't align, you can, what I usually do is I bunch it up, or what I do is that I clip the tip point right there that meets right here where you sew the darts, like that. And then you just manipulate the fabric until it lays flat as you're sewing, like pushing it towards the midpoints here where you're going to be sewing that you clipped. It's fine that it bunches up because you're not really going to see it. So you're going to sew, 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 sew. You're going to come over here, same thing, this last point out of the 3 points here. You're going to make sure you take that point where the two flappy things connect, the two flappy things, not the dart, the two flappy things. and connect it in the middle of that third point. Bam. And then once you're done, you're going to have yourself a completed paw. Everything that I have taught you thus far with the blanket stitch, you really don't need any direction from here forward, because all you're going to do, you already have the knowledge to do it. You're going to sew along those lines with your seam allowance. Again, if it helps, I highly suggest pinning, like trying to find the midpoint. When you push it down, you see? Find where that dart meets here. And for those of you that have sewing pins, just take it, push it away from you, push it down and back toward you. So like that, it looks like that. It's just to keep that little piece in place. So while you are sewing, it you'll be able to know how far you can go with your the play for the fabric. So you guys again have just learned how to set up the Curlworks kigus, or Curlworks free to use poofy handpaw pattern. There's really not much else for me to show you guys, other than once you are done, you'll flip the fingers inside out. You can either make the pillows. What I used to do is I would just make a liner that fit the paws, and then stuff the fingers with polyfill. It's all up to you. Again, this is how to sew the Curlworks free to use poofy, toony, whatever you want to call it, handpaw pattern. Thank you everybody so much for watching. I hope this helped you out in understanding how to figure out where the pieces go for you guys to assemble it. I appreciate it. If you like this video, please make sure to give it a like, comment down below, share this with all your friends, and thank you everybody so much for watching. Oh, don't forget to hit that bell icon if you want more tutorials. Thank you. Bye.